program, but one is our PrAP program, which is post-release accompaniment project. So that helps people that are actually released from the detention centers, but more often than not, they don't have access to resources, including access to resources to get back home, to get to the Central Valley, wherever they were picked up and put in detention centers. So we have a coordinator that works with various groups, various volunteer groups, the religious community, to put together care packages for them, to arrange for temporary housing for them, to arrange even just a phone card so they could call their family, and it arranges for vehicles to be able to drive them back home to Fresno or to other areas in Northern and Southern California. We also have a children's coordinator that works with these families that we're representing to be connected to social services. We work directly with the Oakland Unified School District to make sure that these kids are in school and able to access the services that other kids are, even though while they're going through their immigration proceedings in the immigration court.
We are seeing a high degree of inner city young guys, young men drop out of school. Where do you come into that? Can you help with that?
Sure. So one of our programs is the Youth Law Academy, and it's an after-school program that works with kids in Oakland, East Oakland. We work with them on a SAT prep. We work with sophomores, juniors, seniors. They do SAT prep. They take legal classes to learn about the legal system and how it impacts their communities. They do moot court every year, and I think one of the keys to success of this program is they're all matched up with volunteer mentors, and the mentors are all either senior attorneys or judges.
Wow.
Right.
For real.
And so to have an East Oakland kid to have a judge as a mentor is incredibly impactful for them. It's actually one of my favorites. It's one of my favorite statistics for all of Centro Legal. In the 10 years of the Youth Law Academy's existence, we've had 100% of the Youth Law Academy participants go on to college.
That's a big number.
It's a big number.
How in the heck you guys got to that point where you're that successful?
And it's working with the kids. I think it's empowering the kids. They're in our law firm when they come to class, and they're around the attorneys that are there that look like them, young Latina attorneys, young Latino attorneys, and they can eventually envision themselves on a similar path as them. Where otherwise, without a program like the Youth Law Academy, they don't have anybody to talk to about a professional career, a professional trajectory. So it's just seeing the possibility is what I think makes the biggest difference.
Do you see professional mentors keeping kids out of harm's way, and so to speak, and sending them on to be successful in life in the inner city?
Professional mentors, like
right.
paid?
Not paid, but people who are professionals.
People who are professionals. Yeah, definitely. And it's a tricky thing. Some people are better mentors than others.
Yeah.
And I think some people are better mentees than others.
Mentors and mentees. Oh, you're desecrating the English language like I do, huh? Holy cow.
Well, the mentees are the ones being mentored.
Oh, okay. Like thou and thee, huh? Something like that.
And so sometimes the kids could be better at the match, and sometimes the adults could be better at the match. But when it works out well, I think it works out really well.
Well, do you think a program like this will impact kids in public school? And if our society, our educational society out there, who I believe are sitting on their duffs, that's a nice word, isn't it, duffs?
I think so.
Yeah, I think they're sitting on their backsides, and with no imagination, and no projection. Do you think a program like this in an inner city school will actually impact kids and keep them in school and raise their graduation rate?
I think so. I think if you have community members that care about these kids and care about them on the individual level, that can make the difference for them. I'll tell you a quick anecdote, and it was before I became the executive director. I shared this with someone earlier today, and we were at a fancy law firm called Reed Smith. One of their partners is Latino, and he invited us to the building. It's the big building right across from the Kaiser building, right next to Lake Merritt, that big, beautiful red building there.
Yeah.
I forget the address, but in any event, that office...
Is that right on the corner of 19th?
Yeah, right on the corner, right next to the lake.
Yeah, that's where Crosby, Heafy, Nash and May is.
Yeah. Well, Crosby, Heafy, Nash, I think Yeah, well, in any
They used to be
They
there.
were there too. I think that firm.
That building is a
there?
gorgeous
Yeah,
building.
Yeah, great
A
building.
lot of people in there that are practicing law.
Right, lots of law firms, including Reed Smith, that was on the 36th floor.
Right,
And we had the Youth Law Academy kids come up there for a meeting.
right.
And they went up, and I could see that that was the first time any of these kids had even been in a high-rise. So it was amazing to them to be there. And then to see the fancy law firm with the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out on the lake, looking out on the city that they grew up in, and they had never saw their city from that vantage point.
Wow.
So to see it from literally the ivory tower, and then to have a successful Latino partner come in and present to them, I could see change the trajectory of some of those kids' lives, and it definitely had a huge impact on them.
Why are we failing in actually projecting ourselves legally in the community with good lawyers and stuff? Where is the failure happening at? Why aren't we, getting behind more schools and stuff like that to actually have more people in law? I mean, law seems to be a very gray area.
Right.
You know, we're afraid of it. A lot of people are actually afraid of lawyers.
Right.
You know, so if we can get rid of that fear and this like a stigma, am I right?
Yeah, I think so. There's definitely a stigma of who those lawyers are. You know, there's good lawyers, bad lawyers, or what it is they're doing. Oftentimes when somebody interacts with the justice system, they don't have much control over it, or it's happening to them. They're not really participating in the justice system.
Right.
If you have an attorney, then that enables you to participate in it, and you could start to see the system a little bit differently. The problem comes from just the lack of attention and the lack of funding for low-income people to have access to the justice system. To have
money keeps popping into the situation, the conversation you're having.
That's right.
Money is the medium. Am I right?
That's right. Back in the the 60s, 70s, probably up until the mid 70s, public interest attorneys that worked in a public defender's office, or they worked in an eviction defense organization, or they represented low-income workers, they made about 70 to 80% of what private practice attorneys make. Today, it's closer to public interest attorneys start at about an eighth of what private attorneys do at the big law firms. So there's definitely less of a monetary incentive for people to go into public interest work. And now law schools are so expensive that people are coming out of law school $200,000 in debt.
250. My friend is almost 300,000 in debt.
Well, I believe it.
She is almost 300,000.
The cost of law school has exploded in the last 5 to 10 years.
Right.
And so that dissuades people from representing poorer communities because they have all that debt to pay.
In my estimation, a program to actually fund people to go into law would be advantageous to the Latino and the inner city community. Am I right?
Yeah, I think that's right. Loan forgiveness programs go a long ways.
Right.
And then actually funding them when they're in that position.
Right. You know, I would like to see that happen, especially with the forgiveness program and the fact that if they stay in a position for 3 or 4 years, to give back and have a decent pay to go along with it, I think that would be a good thing.
I do too.
Yeah. Well, you know what? One of the things I'm looking at is you were looking at here, 2016 March. You were looking for a communications director.
Right.
That's still in the books.
Yeah, we're still looking. Although we're looking for a development and communications director. We have a couple of strong candidates, so we might be coming in on the end, but we were still looking. If people out there have a communications background, development background, we're still taking applications.
With Oakland exploding in gentrification and you're seeing tenant abuse, where do you see your organization going in this department?
So our tenants' rights program actually does a lot of work in this area. We represent people in unlawful detainer cases. There is some rent protection in Oakland. It could be a whole lot better.
I see the word retaliation here on my computer.
Right. You can file a retaliation claim against landlords. Say you've asserted some sort of tenant right and they retaliate against you. You can add that retaliation as a particular cause of action for housing cases.
There seems to be a lot of that in the mix going on right now.
Say you live in a home that actually has rent protection and the landlord raises your rent. You complain about it, or you file with an administrative agency that's unlawful, and then they go to kick you out because of that. That's unlawful.
But that's happening.
Retaliation. Yeah, oh yeah.
That's happening big time.
We only have a couple attorneys working on those issues, and they're working around the clock.
How about dire housing conditions? I mean, there are a lot of those places out there people are living are just outright, downright crazy.
Right. There's definitely habitability issues, and we've done quite a few habitability cases over the years. We've had kids come into the office that pull up their pant legs and you can see actual rat bites on their ankles.
Oh God.
From living in a place and where the landlord refuses to fumigate or refuses to even patch a hole in the wall.
How is gentrification affecting you in your services?
You know, I think there's forcing a lot of people out. It's increasing the cost of rentals. There's fewer and fewer homes that are actually or rental units that are subject to rent control. There's a lot of efforts to remove people so that they can increase the rates. So I think the gentrification of Oakland has put extra pressure on that rental stock.
I'm going to say something personally. I don't think Oakland City government is doing enough for its citizens in that respect. And my own personal, not the station's comments, these are my comments, I think they're sitting on their butts. I think they're just watching this. There was one comment that I heard at a meeting that I was at, that if we force all the minorities out of Oakland, that crime will cease or get better. And I'm looking at the fact that all the stuff that's happening with OPD in the past here is a real problem. And we're looking at the fact that the whole organization, in my estimation, and not the opinion of this station, I feel that they're not doing enough to protect the citizens. And I think that the rent problem is gonna exacerbate. It's gonna get worse. And I don't think the city government is going to do anything about it. I think they're looking at the money. And you know what, I'm going to say something to you, and it's not this station, it's my personal opinion, that you know, we're looking at a lot of graft and corruption, so that affects the minority community. Am I right?
I think that's right, and I'd agree with you on the lack of response from the city. There's a moratorium on raises right now, rent increases. But it's not clear what's going to happen next. And I'll note there is some city funding for tenant protection. Some of it comes through the Community Development Block Grants, CDBG funding, and housing organizations have received CDBG funding for the last 10 years. But year after year, it gets cut little by little, and year after year, it gets more and more complicated to apply for. This past year, they actually cut it by $30,000.
That's a lot of money.
So that is a lot of money. That's half of somebody's salary, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
So that's half of a salary for an attorney. So there's a lot of lip service given to tenants' rights and tenants' issues, but when it comes to actually putting the money where that is, that's just not happening.
Communicating with the public, who you are, where you are. How much money do you guys put in that year? How much do you actually contribute? Or do anybody contribute to that? Advertising.
To our funding?
Right.
So our funding comes from, I kind of see it as 3 different distinct pockets. We get quite a bit of government funding. We get some funding from the state to represent unaccompanied minors. We get some funding from the city of Oakland. We get a small amount from Alameda County supervisors through a few different contracts. We get funding from foundations, so these are individuals, sometimes they're small family foundations that care about these issues. And then we get individual funding, so that's donations from individuals or funding through things like our annual gala, and the law firms will donate, they'll buy a table for $5,000, $10,000.
I'm looking at problems with children born in this country and parents who are illegal aliens, as so to speak, immigrants, however you want to put it. Where is that program going? Who is helping that, and how many? I understand that it's millions. It's millions and millions of people who are in that fix right now. How is that impacting you guys?
So SNIPPET, that's a community that we've served since 1969, the undocumented community. And we focus a lot on that population because they're definitely the most vulnerable. They're the most likely to be ripped off by their employers. They're most likely to be bullied by landlords. They're most likely.
Hey man, this is the United States of America. We're supposed to love each other.
That's right.
We're supposed to take care of each other. Yet we're sitting there destroying each other.
Well, I think people make divisions that otherwise wouldn't be there. I think you had mentioned it earlier, the oligarchy. I think the oligarchy likes to place those divisions in impoverished people so that people focus on those divisions instead of what the real issue is.
One of the things I want to say, I'm glad you came today. This is a godsend. One of the things I want to say to everybody out there is vote. If you can vote, this is a critical election. And I'm going to say it, this is not the opinion of this station, it's my personal opinion. I don't think either Trump or Hillary Clinton are fixed to take care of us. I don't think either Trump or Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton should be in office. That's my personal opinion. And I would like to see you get out there and vote for the bunny on the corner, so to speak, whoever you want to vote for. But I think everybody should vote because this is critical. And again, funding. If you want people to send money to you, put it out there. Let's do it again, okay? Because we need money, folks. This organization needs money because they're fighting and they're overwhelmed. And I'm listening to you tell me how many people are trying to get into your services and you're turning people away again. Hell no. We're not going to let that happen. Get out there. Get off your backsides. Get out there and give this organization. You want to put your numbers out there again? Sure.
centrolegal.org is the website. The number 510-274-5044. And I'll note we serve about 5,000 people per year, but we definitely are at over capacity with who we could serve, and it's one of the most heartbreaking things to me is to see somebody that would qualify for our services that is there, but we just don't have the resources. We have 17 attorneys that are working around the clock, an additional 10 or 11 professionals that are helping us meet that, but we still don't have near the resources to be able to meet the need.
So we're going to put a number out there. We're going to put $5 million out there. We want you to collect $5 million. That's not a big number, in today's society. We're looking at an organization that is out there helping people, human organization with heart and dignity and respect and soul. How about that?
5 million would help.
5 million. And I want you to keep in contact with me. I want you to call me once in a while. Say, Charlito, hey, we got 100,000 this month. I'm right here telling you we need to get out, get out here and do this because there's a lot of deportations going on right now. ICE is right here, and they're working tenaciously. It's like the wolf in the sheep's clothing. They're coming at us, and they're coming at us night and day. I want you to get out there and donate money. I mean, you can donate. Get away from the pizzas. If you're overweight, get away from the cigarettes and the booze. Or hey, if you're out there, partying or something like that, and you're dropping change in your car, pick it up and send it to them. They will appreciate it. One of the things we're looking at is the gap between the rich and the poor, and politically and financially. How is this affecting you?
I think that as the gap continues to grow, there's more. It's not just the gap, that it's more people that fall into the bottom half of that gap. So it's more and more people that need services, and not just legal services, services in general. If we're going to treat each other as a larger community, how do you treat those folks or us? I'll say those that there's no such thing as them. I think there's only us, and I think that gap exacerbates the problems. And in the legal world, it exacerbates the problems of folks not having access to justice.
In the legal world, unemployment is a great buffer. It actually sends people your way. Am I right?
It does, and even people that are employed. You can make low income. If you're making minimum wage, you probably still qualify for services.
So what would you, in your estimation, what would you call minimum wage right now?
What I was just
Let's
thinking
not
of
look
was
at the phony numbers we're getting from, from government, okay?
I think that's what I was thinking of was the federal minimum wage or the Oakland minimum wage. I think it was just raised to $12 an hour. I think the federal minimum wage ought to be, of course, increased. If it actually kept up with inflation, if it kept up with what the minimum wage was when it was first passed, it would be much higher. Minimum wage today, there's still folks that can make minimum wage, but still have to work 2 jobs, still have to share a 1-bedroom apartment with somebody else, still have to depend on food stamps to eat. Especially here in the Bay Area, it's so incredibly expensive to live. It's a shame that somebody can work so hard, they can work 60, 70 hours a week and still struggle to survive.
$40,000 a year is the median income here in the Bay Area for unemployed, for low-income people. $40,000. That used to be a good living.
Yeah.
15 years ago, that was a good living. But $40,000, that's a person working two small jobs.
Right.
And I look at that, and here again, I'm asking you out there, if you can do for somebody who's in that predicament, give them a hand, make yourself feel good. A lot of you don't believe there is a God. There is a God. I'm going to say that, in view of everything I've said here. One of the things that I'm listening to is your facilities. How big are your facilities and the impact that you're getting ready to have? And I think, along with the economy going, especially if the elections go sour, and I'm going to say sour, if the elections go sour, we're going to see a bigger impact. Are you ready for that? I just threw you something that I don't know if you can answer or not.
I'd say we're not quite ready for it. I know there's been a lot of discussion around comprehensive immigration reform, and if that happens, there's going to be a huge need for immigration attorneys. And right now, we're already at full capacity, so we would have to come up with some more strategic means, some better way to be able to actually meet that influx if it happens, and to meet that legal need. I think there's some things in the works, but I'll say, if comprehensive immigration reform happened tomorrow, we'd be in a pretty tough position.
That is a situation and a condition right now that everybody's afraid of it. Am I right?
Of there actually being some sort of pathway for citizenship, but then people not actually able to access it because of lack of attorneys, because of lack of funding. And even the immigration courts themselves are underfunded.
That's a sad piece of stuff. Oops, almost said something. Oh, God. Forgive me, folks. We're looking at the fact that we're looking at a lot of hurting people out there, am I right, who have no legal rights, so to speak. They have rights, but no way to get to that right, And again, money is the situation here.
Right.
And I want to say something to people out there. Again, give, help, I'm looking at the fact that you guys are overwhelmed. Do you think there will ever be a federal program that will give you more money on a short-term basis, without, expecting it to be paid back?
Probably not on the federal level. As I had mentioned earlier, the Legal Service Corporation funding used to fund a broad range of civil legal services. During the 80s, there was a huge cut to legal service funding, and then they instituted restrictions on how you can use the LSC funding. And it's actually, California plays a pretty interesting role in that historically. I'll mention an organization that I have a ton of respect for called California Rural Legal Assistance. It was led by their first ED was Cruz Reynoso. And you might know Cruz Reynoso as eventually becoming the first Latino Supreme Court Justice in California.
Reynoso, yeah, I remember that.
Cruz Reynoso. So he received a lot of LSC funding. They worked a lot with farm workers to represent farm workers that were being abused. They were being abused by the agricultural companies, by farms. So there was a lot of pressure to be able to provide services for them. And Cruz Reynoso was doing an incredible job at it. The governor of California at that time, Governor Ronald Reagan, had friends within the ag business, and so he pushed to cut that funding on the state level so that CRLA couldn't get that funding to challenge the ag companies. Well, in California, CRLA and Cruz Reynoso won that battle. They were able to keep the funding. But a few years later, in 1980, Governor Reagan was elected the president of the United States.
Right.
And he took that battle to the federal, the federal government. And then within a few years, they had cut LSC funding so that you couldn't use that funding to represent undocumented folks. And you couldn't use that funding to advocate for legislative policy. So the Centro Legal at that time made the decision, well, we're not going to turn our backs on the most vulnerable members of our community, so we just won't take that LSC funding. And other organizations all over the country were faced with that same choice.
Immigration reform is a monster right now, am I right?
Yeah, there's a lot. There's definitely a need for immigration reform.
You know, where do you see the legal community jumping into this at?
There's been a lot of policy advocacy, legislative advocacy from legal service organizations, but also policy organizations, legislative organizations, to try to make the case for comprehensive immigration reform. So I think legal service organizations play a pretty critical role in trying to convince the legislature that it needs to happen.
Is this feeding of information and stuff, you know, how I say communication, is it coming from the general public, or is it coming from professionals that are, you know, in the law community?
You know, a mix. I think some of the most powerful means of advocacy is through the use of anecdotes, and you only get to those anecdotes by people's real life stories. And so I think it's much more powerful to have somebody who's been through the system, somebody who's escaped violence and has been through the legal system successfully, tell their story. I think it's more impactful than a professional advocate or an attorney trying to explain through statistics. Do
you see the inner community actually growing and becoming a positive element in our society if they had funding and more funding, you know, for legal services?
Definitely, and I think we see it time and time again. Once people are able to regularize their immigration status, they're much more likely to become successful participants in our society. If somebody doesn't have legal status, they're of course going to still work. They're of course going to still try to drive. People have to survive. In fact, people are brought to the country to work, but they're oftentimes not going to be able to assert their rights, which is why we have our workers' rights program, to make sure that people get their due. If they're able to normalize their status, get a work permit, get legal permanent resident, then they're more likely to participate in society and not live in those shadows.
I'm going to throw something at you that's off the record, off the cuff. What made you get into this fight? This is a fight.
Right.
What made you decide that you wanted to be a person, a spokesperson in this industry? What spurred that idea?
You know, I think I grew up in a community a lot like the Fruitvale, and I saw the lack of agency that people had. I saw the lack of power that my community had, and I always thought how horribly unjust that was, and I had no idea what to do about it. But I eventually, like you, I went to the Navy. Only did 4 years, unlike you. But went on to college, went on to law school, and I always carried that sense with me, the sense of wanting to advocate for the underdog. And then when I made it to law school, I actually started volunteering at Centro Legal de la Raza, where I'm now the executive director.
So, hello, wait a minute. Whoa. Let's back up a minute. You were a volunteer?
Yeah, I volunteered while I was a law student. I volunteered at their workers' rights clinics.
So, you guys on campus, a lot of colleges for volunteers to get?
We have law students intern at our offices, especially during the summer. We always have a few interns.
If you're in law school, put your numbers out there again.
It is.
We want you to volunteer. We want you to give some time. Right. You know, it's gonna make your heart feel good.
Yeah, you can apply for internships at the website as well, centrolegal.org.
You hear that? Say that again.
You can apply for internships. There's more information on the website at centrolegal.org, what the application process looks like.
So this will give a person applying a much more broader idea of what's going on out there, and possibly a degree in immigration and stuff like that, you know, pointed toward immigration. I'm glad you came. I'm glad, because, you know, like I said, I grew up in East LA, you know, and that was like a rat's nest, you know. Aliso Village was the place where I grew up in. And in 39th Street, 27th Street, you know, 12th Street, I mean, all those places. In East LA, and, you know, that was rough back then in the 50s. It was really rough. And it's still rough. I have not seen any really movement, so to speak. And I want you to tell people out there, if they want to go into law, where would you recommend that they start, especially in immigration law?
You know, if you go to law school is incredibly expensive. I frankly find it more and more difficult to encourage people to go to law school, to be frank,
But it's necessary.
Unless they really, really know that they want to be an attorney.
Yeah.
Unless they really know that that's what they want to do. And if that's what you want to do, and you want to do it to benefit the public interest, you want to be a public interest attorney to do workers' rights, to do tenants' rights, to do poverty law, to do policy advocacy on behalf of indigent communities, to do immigration law for poor people, then I think it's wise to think about scholarships. Some law schools have pretty significant loan repayment programs, and that's what I would look at. You wouldn't want to graduate from law school $250,000, $250,000 in debt.
$300,000. My friend is $300,000 in debt.
And then go work for an organization making $55,000 a year to start.
So it's a challenging thing out there.
It's a challenging thing, so you have to really know that that's what you want to do, but we definitely need more attorneys that are willing to represent the indigent community. And there actually is quite a bit, but there's just not the political will to fund them. You know, if indigent community can't afford an attorney, that salary has to come from somewhere else.
I understand that the law community needs 150,000 lawyers. When I saw that figure, I was astounded. This is KGM1.com. This is Paul Chavez. Put your numbers out there one more time, and we're going to get out of here. I love you out there, America. Centro de la Raza, Oakland, California. And the number is?
510-437-1554.
Okay, we're going to back out of here. We love you. And hang in there. We'll see you on the next go-round. Yow, folks.